Video games, a widely accepted form of entertainment these days. Many people make their living off video games through mediums such as making games, content creation, or esports. But what if I told you that it wasn't always this way? What if I told you that video games almost died off and might still be at a very slim risk of dying off in the modern day?
To explain why, we're going to have to go all the way back to 1983.
"1983 was a revolutionary year for sure. January 1st, 1983 was the birth of the internet. The internet gave the world tools to revolutionize computers, phones, and most importantly to this documentary, video games. However, 1983 was a very grim year for video games. It was the start of a 2-year recession in the gaming industry, also known as The game crash was primarily in the United States, but it affected other countries as well. Primarily caused by an oversaturation of broken and poor quality games in the market, people just became uninterested with video games.
Another contributing factor was the internet, of course. Many people saw home consoles as old news, and were more excited for the release of personal computers, such as the Commodore 64 or the Apple computer. With these computers having internet access, while also being gaming powerhouses for their time, it was a no-brainer to ditch home consoles in favor of a more well-rounded and powerful device.
However, the game crash was also caused by the game industry itself.
In my eyes, there are 3 pillars of game design: gameplay, originality, and simplicity.
Gameplay is the core of a video game. If a video game has extremely good graphics and an amazing story but has gameplay that just isn't fun, it will fail. Think of games such as Fortnite Battle Royale or Minecraft. These games succeeded because they are fun, not because they have amazing graphics or a great story.
While Epic Games has been trying to cram as much story as possible into Fortnite nowadays, back when the game launched and it blew up, it was just a fun battle royale game with a unique concept. Minecraft is the epitome of amazing gameplay, with a story as simple as, hey, so there's like this dragon, and you can kill it if you want perhaps. You are dropped into an expansive world, and you're allowed to do whatever you want with the tools provided. You can build whatever you want, and you can explore the expansive world blooming with life before you. You can go on a mining expedition, or you can craft the strongest armor and weapons in the entire realm.
People do not like to be deceived. When people see a new game they haven't played on the store shelf, when they get home with it, they expect it to be a completely different experience. Many games these days still have issues regarding originality. Annual releases of sports games, while they are fun, are pretty much the exact same game every year with a $60 price tag.
Take a look at these game covers. Which ones are appealing to you? Which ones look more fun? Chances are, you didn't say whatever this is. The simpler a game looks and plays, the more appealing it is to general audiences. I shouldn't have to read the game manual like a textbook before I start playing. Many Atari games are an absolute snooze fest unless you have the manual on hand constantly. These games just didn't look good enough to be able to decipher what was happening without a manual, which makes everything so much more complicated. However, some of these classic games on Atari were extremely simple as well. Breakout, for example, can be figured out in just 5 seconds. You literally just move a paddle back and forth. How complicated can that be? Breakout is still a very fun and addicting game nowadays due to its simplistic concept. When gameplay, originality, and simplicity is lost, a game becomes boring, uninspired, and complicated.
If a game has any of these qualities, less people are going to want to play it. Eventually, they won't want to play video games anymore, and the market will plummet. After that analysis of the game industry's first fall from grace, I would like to present an interview with my uncle, who has been playing video games long since before I was born.
He started playing games when the market resurged due to the release of the Nintendo Entertainment System, and has amassed a giant game room filled with consoles from the 90s all the way to present day.
He had some extremely interesting details to share about his stance on corporate greed in the gaming industry. Alright, you state your name.
Sure, first and last?
Yeah.
Andrew Wesgan, please call me AJ.
Okay. First question. How long have you been playing video games for?
I would say probably since 1987, 88. So, what's that, 30, 35 years or give or take?
Would your first console be the NES?
It is actually, yeah. My oldest sister got one either for her birthday or for Christmas, but it quickly became my focus of gaming until I got my own.
Alright, second question. What is your favorite video game and why?
That's a loaded question. I'd probably say it's a toss-up either between The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past or Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. I think both games are probably the best of that series on those respective consoles. Well, mostly because I guess for Super Nintendo, I think that really actually was the only Zelda game, but it was very groundbreaking for that system. So if you had to flip a coin, I'd probably say A Link to the Past.
That's a good choice. Favorite console?
Super Nintendo. I mean, there's a lot of great consoles out there. I'm definitely more of a Nintendo guy. I just love all the franchises in the series, but Super Nintendo is, my formative video game years growing up, so I would definitely say Super Nintendo.
So, looking back at how video games used to be, do you see a difference with how they are now in comparison?
I think games have become more sophisticated. I would say, for me, the thing that's the biggest difference is how much they're accepted as part of culture. Not just pop culture, but just culture in general. Growing up, video games, kids who played video games, it wasn't it didn't permeate the youth like it does today. It's just accepted people play video games. It's part of like a natural pastime. I think, there was always some kids that had lots of video games and, and they'd have friends over, everybody would play because it was different and they may not have had games. But nowadays, kids to adults, it's not uncommon for people in their 40s and 50s and even 60s to be avid gamers. And you just didn't really see that, when I was younger. But, I think the essence of gaming hasn't really changed. It's just about having fun, right?
Okay. When you think of greed in the gaming industry, are there any companies that come to mind?
Gaming, like anything else, it's a form of entertainment, but it's also business, right? And there's big business with video games. And so, I think the idea of business is to make money. And if you have a product that people want, there's a need there, or I should say not really a need, but a desire. It's going to drive demand, and money is going to be a part of that equation. So I think you could really say at the heart of every company is the drive to make money. There's probably only there's very few, I think, in the entertainment industry companies that aren't in it for money. So I think, whatever a company can do to make that money so they can keep making games makes sense to me. I think where greed probably comes into play is when you have situations like, and I don't want to knock on EA because they're an easy target, right? And I enjoy Call of Duty games, but they have a cycle of just pushing something out every year, right? So it starts to question quantity over quality. But I got to be honest, for the most part, a lot of their offerings are still pretty fun, and I enjoy playing them with my friends. So for me, the other part of greed is that video games aren't a necessity. It's not food, it's not clothing, it's not shelter, it's a choice. It's entertainment, so you can choose whether or not you want to give your money to something like that. If video game companies want to be greedy and try to gouge, people can just choose to not buy the games. And they'll be able to still live normal, healthy lives. But competition, demand, those things are all factors in, how much companies can charge and who wants to purchase their products. So, I guess that's my answer.
Okay. Finally, do you believe that video games have become less about the passion and drive to make a good game and more about the money?
I think for some video game companies, they're definitely focused to make a profit, right? They either do kind of copycat. They're not as innovative as some other companies. I think that's probably why I like Nintendo so much and some of their IPs. Because, certainly Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, those are all established franchises and they capitalize on them. But I think that they have a culture of wanting to turn out quality products, that are innovative and not just in the games, but in the consoles and peripherals and things like that. But, I do think that there's still, for the multiple developers that are out there now, especially the ones starting out. There's definitely a passion there to look and try to introduce something different or build on and improve existing technologies or enhancements. You know, I remember when Nintendo 64 came out with the Rumble Pack accessory that plugged into the back of the controller, right? You know, that was Nintendo being innovative. You know, they're bringing that passion. And then you quickly saw some of the other console makers like Sony doing the same thing, but building it into the controller, right? So there's that passion to improve. So I think you still see that every generation.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The NES came bundled with one robotic operating buddy, aka Rob, and a gun. These helped Nintendo market the NES as an all-around toy that can also play video games.
It is extremely obvious that Nintendo did not want to continue making games related to these toys, and only use them as a clever way to market their console. How do I know this, you ask? This is how many games utilize Rob.
Nintendo made some extremely good quality games for this system as well, most notably of all being Tennis.
Just kidding, it's Super Mario Bros. An extremely simple game, the first platformer to ever play this smooth, that also sports extremely fun gameplay. It checks all the boxes.
The most important detail to know about this time in gaming history is how the games played and the intentions behind the creation of these games. Corporate executives did not have their greedy hands around the neck of the game industry yet. This allowed companies to make games that were fun, original, and most importantly, filled with passion.
Now we need to fast forward all the way to present day, 2023. Let's learn about how the modern video game industry is following in the footsteps of the pre-1983 one, and how it could result in catastrophic consequences.
Nowadays, it is extremely apparent that something is different with the game industry. Instead of pouring all their effort into one good game, corporations like to stuff their games with microtransactions in order to make an extra buck.
Companies like Electronic Arts release multiple different sports titles every single year and make next to no changes other than updating the roster of players and making the graphics slightly better. This tactic just feels so shady. Companies will sometimes even lock content that back in the day would be included behind a paywall as well.
Games went from a simple buy and play to a complicated corporate money-making scheme that drip feeds players content as they empty their wallets. It's gotten so bad that companies that know they have an established fan base will release games early that are unfinished with less content because they know people will buy it. In reality, making a fully completed game with better and smoother gameplay would probably result in more sales. However, greed gets in the way and games come unfinished.
It checks all the boxes.
Gaming nowadays is extremely flawed, even though it demonstrates great potential. Instead of making amazing games that utilize all of their employees' many talents, companies opt to make unoriginal and flawed games in order to make a buck. I mean, some of the greatest modern video games were made by indie developers.
These people create games with the intent of fulfilling their passion first and to get money second, and it shows.
Companies don't realize how much trouble they may be getting themselves into by utilizing shady tactics.
Eventually, the consumer isn't going to trust video games. And while the market for them may be booming now, eventually it will plateau, and what follows? A sudden drop.